All right, it's been a long time coming, but I have finally finished Pokemon Legends ZA. Not 100%. I haven't done the side content or the post game. I've seen the credits roll. 20 hours in, actually like more like 22. 22 hours it took to get through the main story of this game, see the ending, uh resolve the plot, and there's plenty of stuff still left to do. I imagine it's going to take like 40, 50, 60 hours to see everything. So, and then that's before DLC. So, I still feel as if there's a lot going on in Lumio City for me to uncover over the next several months, and I will be streaming this game constantly over that period of time. So it does need to be said that this is something I don't have a fully defined feelings on yet. I just played through the single player campaign. I never messed with the online stuff. I never messed with like a lot of the side content. There's lots of things to still do in the game, but I do think I've played enough of it to kind of get a vibe for what this game is and to properly review it. Maybe this is like a first impressions video because I am just kind of going over the main story and the game itself, but as a whole, like I really liked it, but I did feel as if it wasn't on par with other Pokemon games. I don't think this was good as Legends Arceus. I don't think it was as good as Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I don't think it was as good as Sword and Shield. I don't think it was as good as Let's Go. I don't think it was as good as Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. For me, I think Legends EA really struggles because it's trying to be a radically different genre than standard Pokemon games. So instead of being about like creature collecting and exploring like a world and like finding new locations and meeting new people, like it's going for that like kind of Atelier Ryza ish Yakuza style, just explore this one city, catch the Pokemon there, and battle them in the streets. And that is a really interesting idea. It's something that's executed fairly well, and it is interesting, and it's a nice change of pace from what we got, especially in Legends Arceus. But at the same time, there is no denying that Legends Arceus is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon games now, and this doesn't quite hit the same level of quality. For me, I think I look at this style, I look at what they're doing here, and I think that like Yakuza did it better. I think Atelier does it better. I think that like there are so many other RPG series that nail the comfy vibe better than this does because Lumio City is a gorgeously rendered, amazing location, but there's not a whole lot to do in it. You know, the characters aren't terribly fleshed out. There isn't a whole lot to the plot. It does feel as if like the game kind of coasts by, kind of introduces plot points and then drops them and then moves on to the next thing. It doesn't have that feeling of being like a real location the way that like Atelier Ryza does, where you have like, these characters who are childhood friends who have these established dynamics who are going through this process of growing up and taking on new responsibilities and figuring out what they want to do with their lives and all that. And all the while dealing with like this very strange, like natural disaster that's plaguing their area and learning more about the world and the history of the mainland and all that. Like, playing Atelier Ryza or playing Yakuza, and you get a sense of like what this game is trying to go for, but doesn't quite hit because like this game introduces ideas for the characters. They come up with funny ideas for the characters. They have interesting concepts and backgrounds and personalities. Like every character in this is great, but like they never really come all together and really establish themselves as like legit RPG like powerhouse characters, right? Like it is very much a stock Pokemon thing. And this is a real problem that Pokemon has, I feel like, where it feels like in order to stay on brand, it feels like they can't do certain things. They can't deviate from the formula. They can't say portray characters as being like evil or like the society the world as being anything other than idyllic. Like right, it is so frustrating getting introduced to all these amazing characters, all these great designs, all these ideas, and then just never really doing anything with them. And it's such a shame too, because these are some of the best Pokemon characters I've ever seen in my life. They're all so fun and have so much personality and so many like they do so many things, and yet at the same time, like they just don't go the extra mile and become interesting and become like and really become standout characters that really excel in the RPG format. Like that's kind of my impression of this game is that unlike Arceus, which had a really that almost felt like as good or better than a traditional RPG, like this feels nowhere near the level of quality I expect from something like this. It is kind of obnoxious that you don't have like more sophisticated dialogue choice options. It is obnoxious that characters just kind of drop in and out of the plot. It does kind of feel like the plot can be kind of contrived. It does kind of feel like the final encounter is just kind of forced, even though you can tell they put a lot of thought and effort into it. Like it just feels like this game's plot doesn't work as well as it should. And it's such a shame too, because they obviously put a lot of thought and effort into the design of the city, its culture, how it's changed that's X and Y, the primary characters, right? They're all so interesting and fun, but yet they don't feel like they have like real character development. They don't feel as if they really have any kind of progression because everyone is kind of stuck in that same idyllic kind of Pokemon vibe with no real sense of risk or anything possibly going wrong. It's crazy how when like disaster strikes, how chill everyone is and how everyone is in like how no one's panicking and how everyone just kind of intuitively knows that'll all work out and like it's part of the Pokemon vibe, but at the same time like it just feels as if like they're not willing to depart enough from series conventions, which is what I think the Pokemon Legends games should be about. Like it does feel like this game is very different from standard Pokemon games, right? There are no gyms. You're not becoming the champion, but at the same time, you're still some random trainer that comes out of nowhere and ends up dominating the Pokemon Legends ZA League. Like I'm just kind of feeling like where are like the better trainers? Like AZ does this thing where he's like, "Oh, we need to find the strongest Mega Evolution user." And I'm just like, "Hey genius, how about that guy from 5 years ago? Where are the protagonists from X and Y?" Like maybe they'll appear in the DLC, but like there's this weird kind of contrast between like what the game wants you to think that you're some rando who waltz into town someday like Clint Eastwood and then like takes over the entire ZA battle royale despite apparently not even owning a Pokemon before. It's things like that that just make me realize like wonder just like what exactly were they thinking? Like honestly playing this, I felt that I wouldn't have minded playing as Tawny, I wouldn't have minded playing as like some other pre-established character. Like why exactly did we need to have an avatar character? Because I feel like with Tawny, like she's the protagonist. She's the one that like kicks off the plot. She's the one that introduces you to like AZ. She's the one that like, she even mega evolves like Floette at the well anyway. But anyway, uh like Tawny is this like essential character to the plot, like, and is like instrumental to like a lot of the plot lines and knows all the characters. And I'm just like, why couldn't she be the protagonist? Like, I found myself thinking a lot about how much I preferred something like Pokemon Coliseum, where you have this character who is your character, but has like an established backstory. He has a history. He has unique abilities, and he really sticks out compared to most Pokemon characters. Like playing this, I find myself conflicted. Like am I playing a new character, or is this like just an extension of like the X and Y thing? Because like it just feels kind of similar. Like, yeah, they obviously couldn't have you playing as the X and Y protagonist because that guy is like one of the best traders in the region now. But again, who is this random? Why is he able to waltz into Lumios and like do all this stuff, and yet like it's it's so weirdly forced, and it just feels as if like the game really needs to think more about what it wants to do going forward. I I personally just felt very much invested in the city and the ideas of what was happening, and yet like the reality of it all was that like I wasn't a huge fan of X and Y to begin with. So all of these callbacks to those games, all the random characters they decided to use again, like what they decided to do with like Lysandre and stuff like that. I kind of realized when I was going through this game's plot, if you assume that this game is canon to X and Y, that means canonically that Zygarde could not have been captured by the X and Y protagonist because Zygarde is like an essential part of the plot. And that just creates this weird feeling of just like this weird contrast that like we know for a fact that Zygarde was not captured by the protagonist of X and Y. So it just creates this weird kind of like feeling of just like, well, is the X and Y protagonist not that good of a trader then? Like why has he not captured this thing? It's like it's to me it's really interesting kind of thinking about these problems. It's kind of thinking about like it's kind of interesting seeing how obviously influenced this was by like a Dragon in particular, the Yakuza games. Like how it's trying to like do the same kind of thing. Even having like a similar kind of character with Kerbo, who is my literally me character, by the way. I am ugh, I am conflicted about this game because there's so much to like about it, and yet at the same time, I'm very frustrated with how it's set up. For example, the battle royale system. So in the streets of Illumio City, in a certain section, that's cut off from the rest of it. You get to battle trainers by night, and you just kind of randomly just jump each other. So instead of like after night, like the trainers come out and you start battling, uh, like it's a certain section of the city. So like it feels like they did it this way to make make the city still feel like a relatively secure location. When what I wanted going into this was that I wanted like people going crazy in the streets at night and doing all this crazy stuff. Like with battles like after sundown, and it's just something that you don't see. It's like it feels too like regulated and controlled to be like engaging and fun, and like the trainer AIs aren't good. It's like it's just kind of frustrating. I was kind of thinking that like, this would be a really good time to improve like the AI pathfinding of enemy trainers, because Scarlet and Violet had this weird problem where like because the world was so open, it was very easy to avoid every trainer in the game. So like I thought that like, having a system where you would have like trainers just wandering the environment, exploring, and then just like challenging you and like constantly improving their own teams and constantly getting better, becoming better trainers as you became a good trainer. I thought that would be interesting if you could like see the same people over and over again and like form relationships with them. And yet like that just doesn't happen. Like again, the game is very stuck in this feeling that like you're basically just fighting randos with no background and no personality. In fact, like even the name characters you go up against in the first half of the game before you get like your mass promotion, like they're not super fleshed out or interesting, and they never really appear again. You can see them around the city, but like good luck remembering it or remembering any of them because they're so generic, and that's not even going into like the randos you fight in the battle zone. So like instead of like making Lumios feel like this lived in environment with all these different people and Pokemon that coexist, it just feels very corporate. It feels very safe, and it feels like the game doesn't really do a whole lot to kind of challenge this notion that this isn't a good thing for people or Pokemon, right? They kind of do this thing where they kind of address this idea that the wild zones aren't popular and that they're a bad idea, but it's something that isn't really brought up outside of dialogue and really has no bearing on the plot as a whole at all. Right? You have all these interesting characters in the second half and a lot of them don't do anything. It's very, very frustrating how this game really could have been this really cool, experience, like about a community, about a city of people, like rallying together to like deal with some kind of unforeseen natural disaster. And that is kind of what it is. But what it essentially amounts to is that some guy from out of town just Mary Sue's his way into fixing the problem for everyone else. And it just it feels as if the game could have been great. If they had fleshed out these characters more, if they had had more like a non-linear story structure, if they had if they had you like interacting with some of these organizations more. I think if they structured the battle royale differently, I think that would have been a big deal for this. So like for me playing this game, I find myself like thinking that like it's nowhere near as good as it could have been. And yet at the same time, it's definitely a lot of fun. I really enjoy a lot of the new Mega Evolution forms. I enjoy like the new battle system. It's not as good as Legends EA, but Legends Arceus, but whatever. I like the kind of changes they've done um, to this game to make it feel fresh, but I don't think it's any replacement for what classic Pokemon does. And in fact, I kind of wish they did more with the real-time combat. And maybe this is a first step for them, and maybe they intend on like evolving the formula more because I do feel like at a certain point you just kind of like spam your best moves and get through the game with no issues whatsoever. It's very frustrating, especially when you're going up against like rogue Mega Evolution Pokemon because they have this tendency of just like blindsiding you and like attacking the trainer and like knocking him out and forcing you to start the battle over again. It's very, very obnoxious because there doesn't seem to be a way to protect your trainer other than like just kind of dodging Pokemon attacks. And it's just not very fun, honestly. It's something I don't want to worry about in a Pokemon game, Like I'm worried about my Pokemon. I'm not worried about me. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of my mindset like with things like this is that this game has a lot of good ideas and yet they just don't feel as engaging as what Arceus did. I'm just not super like enamored with this game to the extent that I probably should be. But at the same time, like it was a lot of fun. I did enjoy my time with it. I am going to keep playing it in the future. And honestly, I kind of expect that the post game and the online features might actually be quite a bit better than the base game. So I still have quite a lot to do before I give my final thoughts. But when it comes to the main campaign, I do think it does struggle with wanting to be a more mature experience, wanting to be radically different from standard Pokemon games, and just not really being able to do it. It's like they've been stuck doing like typical Pokemon stuff for so long that it's very difficult for them to like get away from the formula, even when like it's really nothing like them. I do think they do need to think more with these Legends games, like how to make them appeal to older players. Like I do think they do need to think about making them more difficult. I do think they need to make them think about like having getting better writers on board. I think is the big thing that kind of gets me about this. Uh, I do think they need to tackle stronger subjects. I do think they need to utilize their gimmicks better, come up with better combat systems. But all in all, like it's a perfectly enjoyable experience. It's not my favorite Pokemon game on Switch, but it's definitely something that's worth playing if you're a fan of the IP. In fact, I think like for fans of X and Y, this is going to be a huge deal. Like honestly, I could see this being a fan favorite for certain people. And honestly, like looking at what other people think of this, I think this is the most well received Pokemon in a long time. I think this is kind of like a Bonanza thing again, where I feel like kind of a boomer because everyone else is like really really enjoying their time with this, and I personally am not as enjoying it as much, but I'm really happy for them. I'm glad so many people are finding value in this and like what they're trying to do here. And I hope with future installments they can continue to grow and develop these ideas. I think at the very least we can expect to see that cities will become bigger and more involved in future generations, and that's something that I have always wanted to see.